Welcome to Fearless Mom. We are so excited to get started 2016. I cannot believe 2016 is already here. And for all of you online moms, we want to give you a special shout out. We want to tell you that you may be watching this by yourself, but you are not alone. We are cheering you on, aren't we, girls? Cheering you on from Austin. And online moms, if you're thinking, hey, what's going on? It looks a little bit different. Your eyes are not fooling you. We are in a different location. Lake Hills Church is going through some exciting renovations over in the worship center. So we'll be meeting in this room for the next 3 weeks. And we are glad that you guys are joining us. Now, as I prepared for this semester, for this message in particular, I was reminded of the critical nature, how important it is for us to remember the parenting goal. Because the truth is, with all the blogs and all the articles and all the books and good gracious, the technology that we have at our disposal, every single thing I read could tell me something different. Tell me a new thing that I should be doing with my children. I should feed them this. I should feed them that. Sleep on their stomach. They should never sleep on their stomach. Every child should sleep on her back. She should never be on her back. And I can become overwhelmed very easily when I just consider, what is my job? What is my job as mom? And so when I began to look at that, and I began to think, I remember when my kids were little, and I would think, okay, my job is to keep them safe and keep them fed. That I can do. Okay. And then as they got older, oh wait, it's my job also to potty train? And what is normal? And what is average? And then as they got older, am I hitting the milestones? Good grief. My children, they are fabulous, but milestones, no one told them about them. And so I was often very concerned. Poor JoJo. I mean, he is a great kid, but he was a good 18 months behind when he was 18 months old. Think about it. Yeah. I mean, it was significant. And so that, it confused my purpose. It created fear in my life. Am I doing everything I need to be doing? Then as I got older, am I choosing the right preschool? Am I choosing the right school? Am I helping them enough to set them up for the right college? And then I began to think, am I feeding them the right things? And then, you guys, we didn't even have the stuff that you guys, now you got to do farm to table, whole foods that has never touched plastic or a chemical. It's overwhelming. Our desire, our goal at Fearless Mom is not to add anything to your to-do list. Your list is endless as is. Our job, actually, our passion, our goal, our vision is to actually help simplify by clarifying and focusing your purpose and saying, yes, all that stuff, some of it's good, some of it's bad. Every child is different. Every mom is different. Every dad is different. Every home is different. But we all have the same goal. And what is our parenting goal? So before we begin this semester, I want to remind you of your parenting goal. My parenting goal, whether your child is 13 days, 13 weeks, 13 months, 13 years, or 33 years, your parenting goal is the same as my parenting goal. My goal, my job is to raise independent adults. My job is to, as Max says, work myself out of a job. My goal is their independence. Every decision I make is rooted in that goal. Am I doing enough? I put the fears behind me and I say, I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm allowing God to fill in the gaps when I fall short, but my goal is always independence. Everybody say independence. Now, some of you with newborns are thinking, independence, for crying out loud, I just brought him home from the hospital. He can't do anything by himself. That's okay. That's okay. It happens gradually. But I will tell you this, even if your baby's a newborn, now's the time for you to shift your mindset. Now's the time for you to grasp the concept of that independence. Because as you move forward, the more you understand your goal, the more informed you are, and the more able you are to allow your child to be independent because it's not always easy. As we'll see today, as we talk about what is involved in helping our children be independent adults. Now, we were in student ministry outside of Dallas, in a suburb of Dallas. Mac and I were. Mac was a student pastor, and there was a family in our church named the McQuestians, and they had 3 teenagers, and so we saw them quite a bit. They actually had a ranch outside of town, and they know Mac, in his heart of hearts, really wants to be a cowboy. So we would go out there, and Mac would pretend to be cowboy, so we would go out there, and one time when we were out there spending the day with them, Randy, their son, their middle child, he was probably 14 at the time, maybe 15, he was off doing some of his ranch chores, and we were with his parents. Randy came in and he said, "Hey, Dad, I got the trailer stuck between 2 trees." So his job was to move the trailer, and somehow Randy had managed to wedge the trailer perfectly between these 2 trees, and he couldn't get it out. And you know what his dad said to him? "Figure it out." His dad turned to him and said, "Figure it out." Randy said, "But Dad, I've tried." And his dad turned again and he said, "Hey, Randy, figure it out." Randy went back. I'm sure it took a long time. I saw that trailer. It took a long time. And he figured it out. Fast forward 20 years. Randy is now an adult. He has children. And his son, we saw on Facebook and we've connected with him since, his son was diagnosed with cancer. Now, Randy's parents could not have known when Randy was 14 or 15 that Randy eventually as an adult would hit this bump in the road. But because Randy's parents had the wisdom to give him opportunities to figure it out as a teenager, as a child, now Randy at 35, when faced with a significant bump in the road, a significant turn that he was not ready for, you know what his attitude was when he first heard? We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. That's what we want to prepare our children for. There's no possible way. And believe you me, I have tried to consider every scenario my children may face so that I can prepare them. I can't. But I can do this. I can make decisions today that will help them face whatever may come tomorrow. Because my job as mom is to examine and say, how can I best prepare them for independence? My children are 19 and 21, and yes, they're off at college, but because of technology, we are in communication quite a bit. And there are good things and bad things about that. So we have to constantly work, just as we did when they were 19 and 21 months old. We're working toward their independence. Your parenting goal, no matter the age of your child, is independence. And that is what Randy's parents knew. Now, recent studies show, and I don't know if you guys hit all the Facebook articles that I do when it comes to parenting and some of the trends that they're seeing in colleges today. Studies show right now that children, young people, aren't nearly as emotionally resilient as they were 20 years ago. Colleges are finding that they are getting phone calls instead of from students. They're getting phone calls from the students' parents more than they ever were. I have a friend who is on the national board for a Greek organization, and she said that, 10, 20 years ago, we worked mainly with students. Now we work mainly, who do you think? With their parents, because people are not allowing their children to be adults like they used to be. So my responsibility, your responsibility as mom, is to look at these trends, to study these trends, and then to say, are there decisions I can make today that can help my child face the future better, that can set my child up? I cannot control what my child will face, but I can arm him or her to be ready for whatever they may face. And that's what we're looking at today. I have read and I have studied, and I get so involved in some of these topics that my kids are ready for me to speak on it and move on, because I have talked about it so much. But I believe that what we're talking about today, and it just so happens at the end of this semester, we're bookending this semester with what I believe are some of the most critical, most life-changing lessons that we as moms can learn to best equip our children to set them up for the best futures. Because I know you're here because you want to be a great mom. You're here because you love your children, and that is awesome. So today, what we're going to look at is the concept of grit. What I have found in my studies, it's kind of funny. As I'm talking about independence and as I'm talking about allowing your children to struggle, literally yesterday morning, I found a text on my phone. And Emily, I had already gone to bed, and Mac had too. And so we wake up to these texts. And, you can tell when a text is frantic. And often Emily, when she's trying to communicate her franticness, it's in all caps. And so when I woke up, it was this: is anybody awake? And so obviously we had gone to bed early. And so, and then the next one, see, I had not responded. So the next one was, okay, guys, no problem. I just had a question about Brussels sprouts. It was life-altering. You could tell. You could tell. That's not unusual for us to receive mission-critical or, Mom, why are you ignoring me? I could be in a ditch somewhere. And then I call her, and she's like, I couldn't decide which boots to wear. Yeah, technology, there are pros and cons. It's awesome to be so close to your child. And it's awesome to have that technology that allows us to communicate so much. But as I'm studying this, I'm laughing at some of the texts that I get. And I'm thinking, oh my word. And then I begin to think, oh my word. Some of it was funny. And then I really had to examine, am I setting Emily up for a win? Am I setting Emily's husband up for a win? Am I setting Joseph up for a win? Am I setting his wife up for a win? And so today's lecture, just so you know, is all for me. So thanks for listening in. I hope you're not offended if I just begin to read it to remind myself that God was talking to me. But there is a lady named Angela Duckworth, and Angela Duckworth was she is a psychology professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and she has all these accreditations, Yale, Harvard, all those real important schools, and, that makes her sound really smart. And she, though, before she was a professor of psychology, she was a middle school teacher, and she noticed a trend among her students. She noticed that those who tried harder performed better. Those who did not try as hard did not perform as well. You may be thinking, wow, she learned that at Harvard? But I want you to think about that. Those who tried harder performed better. Those who didn't try as hard did not perform as well. What she discovered was this was not connected necessarily to their intellect. This was not necessarily connected to their natural intelligence. What she discovered was the role that effort played in success, the role that effort played in fulfillment and happiness. And she coined this term grit. Grit is, and I have that definition for you on there, she began to study grit, to measure grit, to study how grit plays a role in not just kids' lives, but adults' lives. Grit is the passion and perseverance for long-term goals, willingness to work hard to make your desired future a reality, having the stamina to stick with it despite the struggle. I couldn't help but think of Galatians 6:9. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. And I began to think about her study and all of the things in our lives that we have to remind ourselves, don't give up. You see, grit is so much more than just academic achievement. Grit is something that we need ourselves, and we need to pour into our children. She developed an assessment to measure a person's grittiness. I have not had the courage to take my grittiness assessment yet, but I will before the semester's over. At the elite United States Military Academy, West Point, a cadet's grit score was the best predictor of success in the summer training program known as Beast Barracks. Grit mattered more than intelligence, leadership ability, or physical fitness. All the way from the military academy to the National Spelling Bee. In the National Spelling Bee, the grittiest contestants were the most likely to advance to the finals, at least in part because they studied longer, not because they were smarter or were better spellers. Grit matters in the academic world. Grit matters in the professional world. Grit matters in marriage. Grit matters when we have a child who is learning to walk. Grit matters. When we have a child who is frustrated with math and cannot do his homework on his own, grit matters. And so, if our job, which we've already established, is to raise independent adults, and as moms, if we want to work hard to set our children up for their best future, and we know not if our child hits troubles. We know our children will hit troubles. Jesus said, in this world, you will have troubles. But take heart, I have overcome the world. My child, no matter how Whole Foodsy I feed him, will have troubles in his future. My child, no matter how well I teach her to make the bed, no matter how well I prepare her, she will have troubles. What's going to be the difference? Her grit. Will she stick with it and fight through? Will she have the tenacity to make her desired future a reality? Will she have the stamina to stick with it despite the struggle? Will she have the passion and perseverance for her long-term goals, whether it is physical development, emotional development, academic achievement, social development? Anybody have a friendship that requires some grit? Yeah, some grace and some grit. It's a good pairing. Oh, I just thought of growing up in the South and we had griots and grits. Does anybody know what that is? It's like griots and grits. Now I thought of grace and grits. Okay. I'm doing Whole30, so I may have several illustrations about food. And then how about being a mom or dad? Anybody need grit in their marriage? Anybody need grit to keep going with a strong-willed blessing? Yeah. Do not grow weary in doing good. How about your spiritual development? Anybody ever hit a place in your walk with God where you said, I don't think He's listening to me? And hey, in case you're paying attention, God, this is not what I planned for. This is not the long-term goal I envisioned, but you trust in Him and you stick it out because somewhere along the way, somebody gave you some grit. There's good news. Grit can be taught, and it can be learned. And now that we all agree, because you're nodding your head, so I'm assuming you agree, that grit can help better set our children up for their futures, that's what we're going to talk about today. How do I build that into my children? Are there decisions I can make? Are there choices I can make today, no matter where your child is in their physical growth, whether your child, like I said before, 13 days, 13 years, 33 years, you can teach grit. I love that. I love that. One of the books that I read, this mom is an awesome mom, and she taught middle school and had children. And then when her children reached middle school, she realized, hey, I'm not sure I have set my children up for success. In enjoying being a mom so much, I maybe have done too much for them. You see, most of what I read suggested that all these parents who were doing too much for their children, whether it's the helicopter parenting that we read about or intervening on behalf of our children to the schools, all these parents loved their children. They wanted the best for their children. But what happened was, in an effort to help their children, they sometimes put their children at risk. In an effort to make their children's life easier, they actually ended up making their lives more difficult. But good news. It's not too late to start now. I was reading this and I think, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I would do different if I had it to do all over again. I've got to trust Romans 8:28. God's going to use all things, even my mistakes in my children's lives, to work together for good in their lives. And now I've got to believe that. Now I have the information. I'm responsible for the information. My children are 19 and 21. I can make a change for their better. So if you have a child, if you're listening and you're thinking, well, my child is 14 and I've made some mistakes, guess what? Tomorrow is a new day. Tomorrow is a new day. The information we have will change your child's future, but you have to change what you're doing. Maybe you have to make some changes. There are 3 things, and they're not in your notes, but I'm going to tell you that before we move on, we all have to agree on these things. And they're not in your notes, I told you that, so just listen carefully. I must recognize my identity apart from my child's. I have to understand that God created me and God created my child separately. And I think that's hard. I think it's hard sometimes for me to separate my child's performance or my child's achievements or my child's progress from myself because I love them so much. Literally, when my child trips and falls, I feel it physically. I'm that connected to him, and those are wonderful things. But for my child to learn grit, I have to first understand that if I'm wanting him to be independent or her to be independent, I have to be independent from them. And that's pretty critical. So number 1, I must recognize my identity apart from my child. Number 2, I must get comfortable with my child's being uncomfortable. I must get comfortable with my child being uncomfortable. And those of you who have kids like Joseph, with Emily, she's uncomfortable if we change the channel. So, we're pretty accustomed to her discomfort. She makes it known and we move on and we laugh about it. And it's so, her passion for life and for everything is awesome. And we love that. I will tell you, with a child like Joseph, who's easygoing, and almost always happy, but he's very sensitive. It's very difficult for me to allow him to be uncomfortable. I'm going to tell you, it's probably more difficult for me to allow him. So if you have a child who has a sweet demeanor, who is more sensitive, you probably have to work on this one a little more, because perhaps I tend to try to protect him from being sad because I know he feels it so deeply and he's always happy, and I don't want to see him sad or disappointed. But I have to remember, for the best for Joseph is independence. And moving toward that, I have to recognize I have to become comfortable with his being uncomfortable. Number 3, I can't count. I must put my child's needs above my wants. I must put my child's needs above my wants. Now, I love doing laundry. I do. I like doing it. It's therapeutic for me. I know, kind of crazy, but I like doing it. Well, Mac intervened when Joe was in middle school, and he said, hey, those stinky football clothes, he needs to learn how to wash. So you teach him, he will wash his football clothes every day. But I'm like, I like doing his laundry. There'll be a time when I don't get to do his laundry. And he's like, what, Mac, what does that have to do with anything? Well, that's interesting. And what does Mac always say? That's interesting and irrelevant. Our job is to raise an independent man. Quit doing his laundry. It's very hard for me, mainly because I knew Joseph wasn't doing it right. But that's okay. That's okay. It's okay. But that's okay, because I wanted to do it, but he needed to do it. Maybe there are some things that you're doing for your children that you love to do. And sometimes that's okay. But examine that and say, does he need for me to do it? Does she need for me to do it? I will tell you this, in all honesty. I made my children clean up their rooms and make their beds. I had a little caveat that if we were having company, instead of having them do it, and then me going back and redoing it, I would say, okay, guys, you know what? I'm gonna clean up today. You don't worry about it. You don't worry about that. Mom's gonna do it. It's just a party day. Mom will do it. What I had to do was I had to be aware of, if I'm allowing my children to do things, I can't go back and redo them. Because what they need is that independence. And you know what independence brings? Confidence. So often we focus on their self-esteem. We want to give them self-esteem, and we rob them of self-confidence. Self-confidence is directly connected to independence. If your child can walk, your child can work. If your child can pull the toys out of the basket, your child can put the toys in the basket. If your child can pick up a paper plate, she can set the table. Look for opportunities for your child to be independent and then let her. Let her be independent. I have to put my child's needs above my wants. I cannot be afraid of my child's failure, discomfort, or struggle. And that scares me. I don't like for my children to be frustrated. One book that I was reading, this author, and she was saying, oh, you'll say that to a group of moms and they are all nodding and the dads are going, yes. I mean, there is value in independence and struggle and learning grit. Then their child begins to cry. And they think, oh, well, we'll work on that grit tomorrow. Yeah, well, there's plenty of time for grit later. I will tell you this, the earlier they learn it, the better off they are. It is hard to redirect once they've gotten so comfortable to you're doing it. But I will tell you this, the author of one of the books, she did not employ all of this until they were in middle school. And when she saw it, and so she sat them down, she had a conversation, and she said, okay, we're going to change some things around here. We've been doing too much for you. And this is going to be a change. And she said there was some gnashing of teeth, but it's okay. She's okay with her child being uncomfortable because she's setting her child up for a win. The same author posted this on Facebook as she was working through this at her own home. For those of you who think this whole letting go of my kids and letting my kids mess up thing is easy, know this. One of my sons left his homework assignment on the living room table, completed in a timely and neat fashion. I actually have to go to his school anyway to drop something off today. Leaving that homework on the table, knowing it will cost him his recess today is, in all caps, killing me. I've looked at it 20 times, even picked it up once, but there it is. And there it will stay, waiting for him to see when he gets home and realize what he could have done to make sure that his homework made it into his backpack and his teacher's hands. I mean, kudos to her. That is awesome. A little funny story about that. I was pretty good about this because I did understand the value of this after having been a classroom teacher. But again, this is how Joseph asked for things. He was a senior in high school. And so he called me and he goes, hey, Mom, I want you to know that I understand this was my responsibility and I totally dropped the ball. But is there any way you could bring my physics folder up to the high school? I was going up there anyway. Well, okay, I was going to the cleaners, which was really close to where the high school was. I walk in with that folder. Now, keeping in mind, Joseph was extremely responsible, which is ironic because sometimes he forgot to wear pants. So, he's that kind of kid. Not literally, well, maybe, so I walk into the office with his folder, and I knew I shouldn't be doing it. I knew it. I probably did not tell Mac until afterwards. I walk in, the lady looks at me and says, oh I go to Lake Hills Church. I was just telling someone the other day that you guys never bring stuff to your kids, that they are so... I was just telling someone that you guys really teach your kids responsibility and you never come in and bail them out. No kidding. I had the folder in my hand. I mean, there was nothing I could do with it at that point but throw it on the counter and run out. I texted Joseph, your folder's in the office. I knew I shouldn't be doing it. I knew I was not setting him up for independence. It is hard. It is hard. Fortunately, Joseph went to college in South Carolina. I mean, it's probably because of me, because God knew he needed to be far away because there is no possible way I can run a folder up there to him. I mean, I have checked on Amazon, but most of her Facebook responses were positive except for this one. I admire you greatly, But I could not do this. I forget things every day. I've driven things to my husband's office that he has left on the kitchen counter. I think a certain level of distraction is inevitable in our lives, no matter how hard we try. And high school kids are the most overwhelmed by it. I would be so happy that the homework was done, on time, neat, and ready. Unless I was able to do so, I would definitely take it to the school. I would save my consequences for homework that was not done or that was not done on time. Now, whose son do you want to hire? Want to hire that lady's son? Or do you want to hire the other lady's son? I'll tell you what, this was so funny. This lady, like the author, really wrestled with it for the rest of the morning. And she began to think, you know what? I would take my husband's forgotten power cord up to the office. Or I would if a friend forgot her keys or locked her keys in her car. I would go help them. So why wouldn't I help my child? I love this. Here is her conclusion in her words. This is brilliant. I think we're going to be friends. She doesn't know it yet, but I got an email to her trying to set up a weekend retreat. Is that too much? Yeah, too much. Okay. Because I'm not raising those other people. I treat my children differently because I have a greater responsibility to them than to make them happy and grateful for my love and support. In order to raise competent, capable, I'm going to throw in there, independent adults, I have to love them enough to put their learning above my happiness. I have to love my children enough to put their needs above my wants. I have to be okay with the thought of Joseph being disappointed or in trouble. I have to be okay with the thought of Emily being really mad at me. And I have to be okay with the thought of one of my children failing a class. Not just a grade, but a class. I have to be okay with that if my goal is moving them towards independence. This mom had to choose to put her child's needs above her wants. Allowing your child to struggle is not easy. I'm not pretending it is. If you have a newborn, if you have a baby, the best thing you can do right now is to understand your own identity apart from your child's, because when you understand that separation, and I mean a healthy separation, when you understand that separation, you're more fortified, you're more armed and ready to make wise decisions. When I'm so close to it, I can't see. I can't see the good for them. I only know how it feels. Let me tell you what can mess you up in parenting: your feelings. Your feelings can get in the way. I need wisdom. I need common sense. I need good judgment. And the first part of that is separating from my child. And I will tell you another part of that is working on my marriage. Working on my marriage. And I'm not just saying that because, yes, there is such value in my children seeing a healthy marriage. That is huge for my kids. They find much of their confidence in knowing that Mac and I like each other. There's so much value in that. But it's not only that. It's also that when my child leaves, I now have my own identity, and my marriage is part of that. And it allows me to see myself as useful, as a full person, even when my children fail. It allows me to be wiser when I make those decisions. I have to be okay with my children experiencing struggle. Let's define struggle. To strive to achieve or attain something in the face of difficulty or resistance. I want you to picture your child right now struggling to cut his food on his own, struggling to feed himself, struggling to walk, struggling to crawl, struggling to ride a bike, struggling to pass a class, struggling to complete the science project. And I want you to picture yourself cheering him on from here. I want you to picture yourself cheering them on from a little bit of a distance. Yes, we help. And that requires discernment. When do I jump in? When do I stand back? You look through these three things. Do I recognize my identity? Am I comfortable with his discomfort? Am I putting his needs above my wants? Then you're armed and ready to make a wise decision about when to step in. But you got to be okay with your child struggling. Struggling produces great results. Allowing my child to struggle, I think, is easier when I see the benefits of struggle. And I'm going to breeze through these, but man, I could spend a year and a half on them. But we'd be done with the curriculum by then. So the first benefit of struggle. I want to read this story. I'm going to read it, okay, before we get there. There's a Native American legend, and you guys may have heard this, but I think it's probably the best picture for me to imagine when I'm allowing my children to struggle. There's a Native American legend of a man, and you may have heard this before, watching a butterfly as it fought to emerge from a small hole in its cocoon. Now, the man watched for a long time, and the butterfly, the wings were sticking out and working on it and working on it and working on it, and the butterfly could not make its way out of the little hole. And the man watched for hours, and then all of a sudden, there was no more movement. And it stopped. And so the man watched, and he thought, I'll help the butterfly. I'll help it. It needs help. It can't get out of that small hole. So the man gently and carefully opened that opening up big enough for the butterfly to make its way out. Well, he watched, and the butterfly made its way out, but the body was swollen, and the wings were shriveled, and the butterfly was never able to fly. What the man didn't understand was that the struggle to get out of that little opening, waiting, starting over again, the struggle was what actually made the body fluids go to the wings, that made the wings strong enough for the butterfly to fly once it was out of the cocoon. What a picture for us as moms. What a picture. When I read that, I immediately could see my children. And when I see the value of the struggle, it helps me allow the struggle. But I have to remind myself of the value of the struggle. Struggle will build the grit in my children. It's allowing them to experience sadness, disappointment, hurt, failure. We don't want our children to fail, but guess what? Failure teaches a lesson. And I'd much rather my children fail when they're 8 years old living at home than when they're 38 and have a family to provide for. And so allowing your child to struggle builds his wings so that he can fly. The benefits of struggle. And this is going to G-R-I-T. Can you believe how that worked out? Building grit. What's the value? Growth. The G is for growth. Everybody say growth. Say it with enthusiasm. Growth. You know what? Because it's hard, and you're going to have to remind yourself, this is for my child's academic growth, spiritual growth, emotional growth, physical, whatever it is. You'll have to remind yourself, his wings are getting stronger. His wings are getting stronger. I want him to be able to fly when he leaves my cocoon. Feeding himself or herself. Man, some of us, we don't like mess. So it's easier and it's quicker if I do it myself. But you know what I'm doing? Putting my wants above my child's needs. Putting my wants above my child's needs. Allow him or her to fix his or her own lunch sometimes. Allow him or her to do his own laundry. Allow her to clean up her own room. Create opportunities. You know, we live in a world today, we used to leave the house, literally. And my parents were good parents, okay? So it's not like they were negligent. But we would leave the house on our bikes. I'm not that old. And my mom would whistle, and we would know to come home. We had opportunities all day to figure things out. We had opportunities with our friends to work out problems. We had opportunities to figure out, oh man, she got her bike stuck down in the ditch. How are we going to get it out? I'm not even sure we're supposed to be down in here in this ditch. And we better get it out and get home. We had opportunities to grow through the social development and the emotional development, that process of figuring it out. Our children in our world today, I want you to think about it. They don't have independent time. They don't have those opportunities. We are with them almost all the time. There's almost always an adult with your child. You know what you have to do? You have to create opportunities, and you have to make an effort to allow them to grow. If your child can speak, he can order for himself. If your child can walk, she can work. If your child can, like I said, pull it out and put it back. So work on opportunities to create those growth. Any child your task can do independently, let them do it. Maybe not all the time, but some of the time. Doesn't always work, but create opportunities. It takes intentionalities. This is how they'll learn from mistakes and mishaps. This is how they will learn risk management. So G is for growth. R is for resilience. Good grief, emotional resilience. This is 48 lessons in itself, emotional resilience. I believe that emotional resilience may be the answer to so many of our problems with our teenagers and our college students today. I'm still studying it, but I believe emotional resilience, if we figure out how to arm our kids to be emotionally resilient, I believe that we can set them up for the best life. Emotional resilience says, I can take a hit, but I can get back up. I can bend and I will not break. We were very fortunate. In this day and age, it's unheard of what we have in our elementary school. Angela Woodbridge did choir auditions starting in second grade. In second grade, they would walk in, they would audition for a part, and they would walk out. How scary. Can you imagine your 7-year-old? I'm telling you, my kids did it every year. She did it second, third, fourth, fifth. My children probably learned more in her class than they did in all of her other classes, in all of their other classes combined. You know what they learned? Sometimes I get the part and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do well and sometimes I don't. And sometimes my friend gets the part that I want and I have to be happy for her. Do you know that she gets so much pushback from parents? That why do you do auditions? That's going to hurt my child. You know what? I'm like, are you kidding me right now? My children believe Joseph would audition for anything. I mean, Joseph walks in any room, sure, what you need. He played football. One time we were watching him, Mac said to me, he goes, I'm pretty sure that's Joe kicking. Joe's not a kicker, he played quarterback. And so we looked, and after the game, we're like, hey, Joe, we saw you kicking. Well, 2 guys were out with the flu, and they said, does anybody want to kick? And I said, I would. See, you know where he learned that? Angela Woodbridge's class. I'll try. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I won't. Create opportunities for your child to fail. It's not all bad. I know that I'm going to get some pushback when I tell you I'm not opposed to children feeling stress. I don't think it's all bad. I think that some things that our children do in school are stressful. I think it's awesome. I think my child learns how to manage his or her stress. I think my child knows how, to identify, I'm feeling stressed. What do I do with it? How do I respond to this? I can bend and not break. I did my best. I would tell my children before all those tests, I would say, hey, it's just like a basketball game. You practice. You go play. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You always do your best, and you keep trying. It's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity to learn emotional resilience. Create opportunities for your child to learn they can bend and not break. Allow them to bend and not break. It's hard. It is hard because we're so attached and we want to be happy all the time. Oh, my word, that's our last lesson of the year, and it's so exciting. I can't talk about it right now. Okay. Identity. Growth, resilience, identity. In working to give our kids self-esteem, I believe we often rob them of self-confidence. Joseph had a speech impediment. He would say, I don't talk, Billy Dood. And one time Mac heard him tell somebody that. And I look over, Mac just has tears. We didn't want Joseph to be embarrassed. We didn't want him to struggle. Especially because he is the sweetest child. And he was. But I knew that Joseph had to learn to speak for himself. I knew that if he was going to be a man, and if he was going to stand up for himself on the playground, and if he was going to stand up for himself in the locker room, and if he was going to go off to college and be his own man, he had to learn to speak for himself. It was hard. We went to restaurants, and he would say, Mom, and I'll imitate him now. Because it's funny now, because he ironically is doing acting. If you could have seen him on stage at the Westlake Musical, you would have been like, for real? That's what we were doing. We were like, oh my gosh, who is this? But he would say, Mom, can I please have some ketchup? And I would say, you need to ask the waiter. Get his attention and ask him for ketchup. He would call the waiter over. The waiter couldn't understand him. I so badly wanted to just say he wanted some ketchup. I couldn't. I let him struggle through it. And he learned how to speak for himself. Every Friday, I went to Chick-fil-A in the mall, and I would sit, it was safe. And I would give Joseph a $5 bill, and I'd make him go stand in line at Chick-fil-A. I had to create opportunities. Joseph didn't grow up in a day and age where you could leave on your bike and come back home. I would say, go order for yourself. I go, they're going to assume you're with another mother, so you're going to have to be assertive, and you're going to have to speak up. And so he would wait, and that wasn't his personality type. He had to fight to speak for himself. Emily, on the other hand, I gave her money, and I would go, wait your turn. It was a great lesson for her, too, but I was more like, all these people don't work for you, be kind, And so I'm teaching them two different lessons, but it was just as important because they had to work to be independent. And let me tell you, when you have a child like Joseph, it's not easy. It is not easy because I knew that it was possible that there was going to be someone who laughed at him. I knew that it was possible that they weren't going to understand him and he was going to feel helpless, but I knew he had to do it. And I believe that God used those moments to grow him and to develop his independence. It was not easy, it was worth it. Wherever your child is struggling, you look and say, okay, am I allowing the appropriate amount of struggle? Do I need to intervene? That's where wisdom comes in. Can I allow him to push through? Will it help with his confidence? I'm telling you today, Joseph is not lacking in confidence. We often say, oh my goodness, I wish that we had half the confidence that Joseph has. And then we say, sometimes Joseph should have half the confidence Joseph has. But he is confident today, and I believe it was because of teachers like Angela Woodbridge and the choir program and the football program and the baseball program and the basketball program where he was allowed to experience failure and learn that he could bend and not break. He didn't always make the A team. One year Emily didn't make the team. And there were tears. She learned from it. She tried out the next year. They learned their own identity and that they can do it. And that's the final one, tenacity. When Emily was a junior in high school, and I love AP classes, I don't think they're for everybody. I'm going to give that big disclaimer. When parents ask me, should I do AP classes? I go, should my child do them? I'm like, what do you mean, your child, or are you going to do the AP class? Because this is what I would say. I would say if your child needs tutoring to do the AP, why do the AP? And I don't mean like one or two tutoring. I'm talking about regular. Can your child also stay involved in church? Can your child also have downtime? Can your child also play a sport or be involved in extracurricular? Because academics are a part of growth, a part of growth. It's not everything. I've seen kids get into UT. Everybody's like, well, they have to if they get into college. No, they don't. I've seen kids with the AP scores to get in, and they didn't get in. And I've seen kids who took one AP their freshman year, and they got in. Don't buy the lie that your child has to get a tutor to survive high school to get into college. Give your kids some grit. Give your kids some grit. I'm ripping through these because we got to go. Work to prepare, not to protect. You got to move from the mindset of my responsibility. When your child comes home from the hospital, your job is to protect and provide. Shift your thinking. My job is to prepare. It's a change in thought process, but you can do it. Second, praise the process, not the product. Draw attention to and place value on the struggle. When Emily was struggling, I would say, man, you worked so hard on that. She'd come home, I did well on the test. I wouldn't say, you're so smart, great job. I said, look at that. Man, you worked your tail off. I'm praising the process. I'm drawing attention to the value of the struggle that it took to get there. So she's not afraid of struggle anymore. One test she did not do so well on. She came home, and I said, did you do your best? You worked hard. You studied. There's value in that. No wasted effort. No wasted effort. There's value in the process. Praise the process, not the product. Teach how to think, not what to think. Teach how to think, not what to think. Mom, what does this word say? What do you think it says? And work through it with them. It requires a lot of patience. I get it, but it's worth it. Mom, how do you spell blank? How do you think you spell it? Teach them how to think. Mom, what is 5 plus 4? What do you think 5 plus 4 is? Let's look at it. Work through the process with them. Teach them how to think, not what to think. When they come home and they're talking about things that happened at school, don't immediately say, well, you should have done this, this, and this. Say, explain to me what was happening. What was your thought process? How'd you get there? Okay, I can totally see how you got to that. Now, let's say, what if you had tried it this way? Work through it. Teach them how to think. Because then when they go off to college and they're presented with other ideas that may not line up with what you taught, they know why they think it because they came to that conclusion on their own, because they learned how to think, not just what to think. Teach how to think. It's mission critical. Give support, not safety. This one, it goes back to the assignment. Allow your children to suffer the natural consequences. Your kid may not be the nicest one on the playground. It's not a personal affront to you. Separate your identity from his. If your kid is being mean on the playground, don't try to hide it or act like it's okay. Don't get defensive about it. Look at it objectively. Yeah, I know, easier said than done, but I'm trying to give you the goal here. You're doing your children favors by looking at it objectively and seeing, it could have been my child who was the mean one. Could have been. Let me look at it and say, how can we make it better? Don't take it personally. That's that identity separation. When your child is developmentally behind everyone else's, and on Facebook, you're like, oh, gee whiz. I mean, I see y'all see every stage of development. And, guess what? You only see what they want you to see. You didn't see the 84 times that the child fell, or you only see the final product. And that's okay. There's so many wonderful things about technology. But when you separate your identity, you don't hold on so tightly and connect yourself and your identity and your success to your child's progress. I can help my child a lot more if I'm looking at his milestones objectively and not how oh my gosh, everybody's going to think I'm a bad mom. No, everybody's too busy looking at their own mothering. Everybody else is thinking the same thing. So separate and give support and not safety. So I'm supporting my child, but I'm not going to shield them from natural consequences. Natural consequences teach your child. They can bend and not break. They can come back from failure. Natural consequences teach failure is not fatal. Don't be afraid of failure. But if I don't check Skyward every day, do y'all have Skyward or is that just Eanes? Does everybody have Skyward? Whatever you have where you can check the grades every day, gee whiz. I mean, I'm sure there's wonderful things about that. But I'm just going to say, as a teacher, it would have been my worst nightmare, first of all. And secondly, don't they get a progress report midway? Yeah, that's all I need. That's all I need. I don't need to know every day. My kid needs to figure out, oh, they dropped one grade, I got a 0 on that homework. And my child's struggling in middle school, he talks to his teacher, not me. That's not my job. I already did middle school. I did pretty well. Now your turn. I 4th and 5th grade, so that independence comes gradually. You can't be so involved and check Skyward every day and then send them off to college and expect it to go well. You gradually let go. Do y'all have that Skyward? You know what I'm talking about? Back away from the Skyward. Okay, give support and safety. And if he'll fail, guess what? He'll fail. He'll fail. If you let go a little bit in middle school, then it doesn't affect their college. And guess what? If he fails a class in high school and it does affect what college he'll get into, guess what? He'll survive. He'll get into the one that he can get into, or he'll do what he can do, and he'll be just fine. You're moving toward independence because this determines their relationship with God. Ultimately, that's what it all goes back to. Their confidence, being rooted in their own identity. It's a big deal. I talked too long because I got so excited about this topic. So forgive me. So I want to leave you with that last quote. Prepare your child for the path, not the path for your child. I don't know who said it first, but I heard Colt McCoy's dad say it. And because he is so impressive, that's the one that stuck with me. Prepare your child for the path, not the path for your child. Examine, are there things I can do today to create opportunities for my child to learn independence for a better tomorrow?